Sitchin theorized that the story recalls the first phase of the existence of the hybrid man, a being in likeness and image of the gods, but incomplete in some ways, including sexually, lacking in quote unquote, knowing. However, they were still useful to the Anunnaki's plan as servants in some way, shape, and form. According to this theory, for many thousands of years, Enki continually cloned and created new proto-humans who would grow up to become minors. However, these beings were sterile. They could not reproduce. During the period in which they grew into adults, these first humans were placed in an area where they could be contained and not leave. Sitchin believed that it was only when they grew up enough to be useful to the Anunnaki that they were transported to the mining area in Africa. I will also fully acknowledge that there's some discrepancy in this idea though, because the story of Enki and Ninmah specifically says, Ninmah took clay from the top of the Abzu in her hand, and she fashioned from it first who could not bend his outstretched weak hands. The use of the location Abzu here though suggests that the creation of humanity actually took place in Africa, which also aligns better with the mitochondrial Eve discovery that we looked at earlier. Perhaps then it's just the other way around, and that after fashioning these servants, they were found useful to the Anunnaki in other ways than mining, and were transported to Mesopotamia to help work in and maintain Eridu or other locations nearby. Either way, it's believed that the location where these slaves worked in Mesopotamia was a place called Eden, which is the root word for the biblical Garden of Eden. There's a few ideas about this translation though. Today, most modern scholars translate the Sumerian term Eden as steppe or plain, suggesting it refers to a large field, I guess. Sitchin, on the other hand, translated Eden to mean home or abode of the righteous ones. At any rate, it's what happened in this location where things get intense. A dispute was growing betwixt the gods. You see, Enlil is often described as the oppressor of humanity, a bit of a patriarchal overlord who commanded the slaves. Enlil is said not to really care about humanity though. He just wants to mine gold, destroy humanity, and go home. The tablets even say that he orchestrates a massive flood to wipe out humanity, a subject that we'll get to shortly. Enki, on the other hand, is described as humanity's champion. Enki cares about humanity and sees them a bit like his children. And while they've been producing all of these sterile slave humans to mine gold and till the fields and all that stuff, in secret, he has been continually refining and developing the human genome to produce the perfect human, one who is capable of reproduction and living as its own sovereign species. This story says that Enki finally discovers the perfect genetic pairing and that a real human is achieved. On the subject of the creation of the first humans and this land of Eden, there are two Sumerian myths I'd love to share with you. The first being Enki and Ninhursag, and the second being the Atrahasis. Now, the story of Enki and Ninhursag is a bit long, so we're just gonna summarize the essence of it here. Basically, in the story, there is a paradise land called Dilmun. The story begins with what you might call not safe for work content. So I'm just gonna gloss over that for now and say that eventually, Enki eats 8 unique plants in this sacred paradise land. Unfortunately, the goddess Ninhursag considers this act to be a terrible sin. In a way, these are a bit like forbidden plants, and so she causes 8 of Enki's body parts, including one of his ribs, to suffer. Soon, he is on the brink of death. Enlil, along with a magical talking fox who I'm imagining was just adorable, takes up Enki's cause and persuades Ninhursag to relent. Ninhursag returns to Enki and asks him 8 times, "My brother, what part of you hurts you?" And he responds with the various parts of his body that hurts. As Ninhursag heals his body, 8 different deities emerge in the healing process. And the one who emerges in the healing of his rib is the goddess Ninti, whose name means both Lady of the Rib and Lady who makes life. As you can tell, there are tremendous parallels to this story of Eve being created from Adam's rib in Genesis 2, as this is its likely origin. Further, Eve in Hebrew is Hawa, and is most commonly believed to mean living one or source of life. What I find especially interesting about this is that in the Sumerian story, the characters on who Adam and Eve are based on are both deities. While the name Adam comes from Adamu, the character seems to be based on Enki, and Eve's name relating to life and being born of Adam's rib fully links her with Ninti. Now, the second story I mentioned, the Atrahasis, essentially begins as the Enuma Elish ends, with the need for servants for the gods. Instead of Kingu, however, an Anunnaki named Wei Lu, also Lawela, volunteers to be killed for the use of his blood. And his flesh, blood, and intelligence are kneaded into clay by the mother goddess Ninhursag. With this mixture, she creates 7 male and 7 female human beings all at the same time. These 14 new creatures are exceptionally fertile, and soon there are hundreds and then thousands of people on the earth, all doing the work which once occupied the Anunnaki workers. The story goes on to say that the humans grow very noisy and even obnoxious and disturb Enlil to the point that he decides to destroy them all. Didn't Apsu and Tiamat have the same challenge with their kids? I guess history truly is doomed to repeat itself, unless we can learn from our past mistakes. Anyways, the significant part of this story is that it says that they produced the men and women at the same time. It's important to note this because for thousands of years we've been taught by the religious institutions of the world that the man came first, and that seems to pervade through our patriarchal society in a rather uncomfortable way. I hope that today, as we become more aware of these older stories, we might come to have a deeper understanding within us that we truly are all equal, and the patriarchy can fade away into a society that respects and honors all sexes equally. Returning to the main story, we saw Enki and Ninhursag have been toying with the genetics until they could create a perfect being, one who could reproduce and think for themselves. The moment they did, it marked a huge turning point for everything, because the success of this experiment changes the human genome to enlighten mankind. But as mentioned before, this was the beginning of a huge problem, because Enlil did not want humanity to become a sovereign species of their own. He had plans to make little robot people to work for him, and then he was gonna just outright destroy them all. When he found out what Enki had done, he was furious and exiled the humans from the Anunnaki settlements. Now, as a side tangent, here's something I think you're really going to enjoy. In the first episode of Ancient Civilizations on Gaia, Greg Braden explained something that is positively mind-blowing, a very relevant discovery found within our own DNA. Check this out.
Shedding new light on these creation stories is with the mystery of human chromosome number 2. Human chromosome number 2 is the second largest chromosome in the human body. It forms about 8% of the DNA in every cell. And what makes it such a mystery is that it appears to be the result of an ancient fusion of pre-existing chromosomes from primates that have been fused in a very precise way, and the fusion site has been modified and stabilized so that human chromosome number 2 is optimized for us today. This has happened in a way that cannot be explained by evolution as we know it today. Now, why is this important? Human chromosome number 2 contains the genes that largely set us apart from all other forms of life. The cortex of the human brain that gives us the ability for things like logic, empathy, sympathy, compassion, the ability to consciously trigger conscious states of self-healing within our bodies. These are possible because of what has happened with human chromosome number 2.
Could chromosome number 2 be the work of a master geneticist, otherwise known as Enki from the Sumerian text?